cough. We're recording it so that we can actually take actions throughout after the session. But also we wanted to make sure that anyone who wasn't able to attend could actually have an edited version of the output, if that's okay with everyone. So that's the purpose of our recording. I'm Jackie Johnson, and I was the co-founder of the Australian Sustainable Finance Initiative. And I'll give you a little bit of a history of how that came to be. But it was in my role as Group Executive of the Insurance Australia Group, and also my role that continues at the moment as co-chair of the United Nations Environment Programme Financial Initiatives. I'm also a non-executive director of Community First Mutual Bank and a very proud PhD candidate at University of Wollongong. So I myself are trying to make that bridge between academia and business. And so we thought it was a very important opportunity to make sure that we gave an opportunity for universities to continue to engage in ASFI. Before I start, I'd like to just make sure I acknowledge the country that I'm sitting on at the moment, which is the Gadigal country of the Aurora Nation, and acknowledge their elders, past, present and future, but in particular acknowledging the lessons that we learn on sustainability and resilience from the oldest nations on the earth. And we are very grateful as ASFI for the engagement we had from First Peoples into the roadmap, which made sure that we heard the voices and see that the roadmap is a way to make sure that we have an inclusive finance sector for First Peoples as we start to think about what our finance sector should look like going forward. I'd also like to acknowledge Climate Kick, who have been our partner along with presenting these forums. This is one of 6 forums that we've been hosting since October, and also the European Union Australian Climate Business Network that has helped fund a series of workshops for us, and we felt it was very important that we had one for academics. I'd also like to thank those that are on the call who have been part of the roadmap, because for us it was very important as a finance sector that we engaged federal, state, local government, but also academia, and hearing the voices of research and evidence and what was required to have a sustainable finance system. And your ongoing participation will be welcome. I just thought I'd outline, before I hand over to Christy Graham, the Executive Officer, a bit of a plotted history of ASFI. So back in 2018, the banks and insurers who are members of United Nations Environment Programme Financial Initiatives, lots of acronyms in the sustainable finance space, so UNEP-FI, realised that a lot of countries were starting to develop a sustainable finance roadmap, often initiated by their governments. And the most high profile one at the time in 2018 was the H-Leg report in Europe. And we started to look at what would be necessary for Australia if we were able to compete globally for capital, but also, being from the insurance sector, the reinsurance capital that was required with ongoing weather patterns. And we discussed with the federal government at the time, and it was seen that if the industry was keen to lead such an initiative, Treasury would support it by enabling ASIC and APRA to sit in as observers and also be involved within the process. So we held a summit back in 2018, and thank you to Sydney University, who gave us access to their law school facility to actually hold that summit with over 300 people attending. And that included academics, it included federal, state and local government, civil society and investors, banks and insurers from that. And we had the United Nations come and also present on what was happening globally. From there was an overwhelming sense of support of industry leadership to form a roadmap for Australia. And we're unique because it's been industry-led, industry-funded and supported by federal, state and local government. We then set up in 2019 a steering committee, which would be the governance body. And thank you to Robin Quiggin from UTS, who was on our steering committee and made sure we considered First Peoples, but also the academic lens of what we needed to make sure it was inclusive. And we had a coordinating working group, and importantly, 4 working groups on various topics. Now, a little thing called the Royal Commission was also then in flight halfway through us starting to consider the roadmap, which might have derailed the process, but in fact it galvanised the finance sector about we had a problem to address if we wanted to be relevant to society. This particular roadmap, you'll hear from Christy, involves social and environmental goals, where a lot of the other roadmaps internationally have focused on environmental goals. As we started to progress, we made sure 2019 was focused on what are the challenges we're trying to solve here for Australia and what role would the finance sector play. And by December, we had an interim report that you can find on our website that was released, and it identified what the challenges were. And we had a conference in Melbourne in December, probably the last real live conference we were able to hold. And we had Dr. John Thwaites come and present, and where he presented the research on Australia's performance against the SDGs, which then gave an informed position for the finance sector about where the areas were that we really needed to focus to improve social and environmental outcomes in the Australian context. And then roll forward to 2020, post bushfires, in the middle of COVID, we continued to have 140 people very actively engaged in creating the recommendations. And by November, we were able to publish the full report, which once again you can find on the website. And today, Christy Graham, who is the newly appointed Executive Officer, will give an update on exactly what that roadmap says and what are the 4 domains that are involved. And what we have focused in 2021 is, as we released the roadmap and started to continually engage across Australia, was the desire for a body to continue that united investment, banking and insurance. There are very few opportunities the 3 parts of the sector get to come together to look at the implementation. And it's not to duplicate work that's already been done, it's actually to coordinate and align the work in a fashion that makes sure that we're achieving what needs to be achieved for us to have a sustainable and resilient finance system. And so that's the context of the roadmap. By August this year, we had set up the company to be a not-for-profit company, and we appreciate Minta Ellison working with us to set up all the governance structures for that. We've recently had elections for the formal board, and so there are 6 positions that are elected positions from the funding organisations, 2 banks, 2 insurers and 2 of the investment community. And next year there will be 2 positions on the board that will be appointed positions by the board once the strategy is outlined. And we'll have an advisory committee that APRA and ASIC will sit on, as long as will the industry bodies, to make sure that we're not duplicating work, but we're accelerating the work that needs to be done. And so today was a really important opportunity for us to engage more broadly with the academic community. And in particular, inspired by the Principles Responsible Investing, who have a PRI academic network that seems to be a really useful way for academics to present their work and to engage in practice with the finance sector and particularly the investment community. And this year I attended the Academy of Management Forum. And what I observed was the really useful sessions where academics were able to work with the business community and discuss their research, but also make sure that there was an open dialogue. So we've been inspired by those forums and want to explore that a little bit with you. So today is really to update you on ASFI, to get your engagement on where you think ASFI and academia could work together in Australia to bridge that research academic gap and make sure that we consider the academic work that can actually accelerate our finance system to make sure it is sustainable and resilient in terms of achieving the environmental and social goals by 2030, which is a very big ask given we're way behind so far. So we really look forward to your engagement. The session will be structured by, I'll hand over to Christy Graham, our Executive Officer now, to outline the roadmap. We'll then have breakout rooms, which Christy will give us some instructions on how to go into those rooms. And then we'll come back, have a general discussion, and then Christy will outline next steps. So thank you for joining us. It's really appreciated. Over to you, Christy.
Thanks very much, Jackie. And to echo Jackie's comments, it's really exciting to have so many of you involved and engaged, and thank you to all of those who've been engaged up to this point in the development of the roadmap as well. I'll just share my screen, so just bear with me for a moment. Okay. Is that working for everyone? You can see the slide. Excellent. So I'm going to sort of outline and provide a little bit more detail, building on what Jackie's given.
Do you want to put it in presenter view? Because we can see your notes and everything.
Oh, can you? Okay. It is in presenter view. Just
yeah, that one there.
Is that no. I'm assuming you can't see that. I'll try one more time.
Christy, maybe down the bottom where there's the little, yeah, that's it.
That's it?
Thanks.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, sorry about that. So yes, building on what Jackie has sort of outlined, I'll provide a little bit more background and information on the content of the roadmap and talk through the 4 domains of the recommendations, really to set the scene for the next discussion, where we're really keen to hear from you about your research, how it could contribute or map to some of the recommendations that were developed through the roadmap process, and where there are research gaps as well, and how we can bridge that research. So as Jackie mentioned, there was a huge collaborative effort to develop the roadmap, 140 participants from 80 organisations, with strong engagement from both civil society, academia, regulators, as well as some involvement from government. And it really, as a roadmap, sets out recommendations for both industry, individual institutions, as well as regulators and government to realign the financial system for a more sustainable future. So you can see from this slide the primary objectives that the initiative had to realign the financial system, and the initial report that Jackie mentioned outlined 6 critical challenges, and the work then from the working groups to develop the roadmap was focused on how to address these 6 critical challenges. You can see that there's a broad coverage: leadership and culture, covering both social and environmental, community and consumer interests, as well as building and developing new sustainable financial markets, and the policy, regulation and supervision that needs to go alongside that and ensure that they're credible. So what's the vision for the roadmap? And it's a bold vision, but one that has been really galvanising to get the whole finance sector as well as regulators and others behind. So it's about sustainability, resilience and stability, and looking at systemic risks as well as shocks and strains, recognising that with climate change and other challenges facing Australia and globally, the financial system will really need to be able to weather those storms and help transition Australia from where we currently are to where we need to be. So that long-term thinking, as well as balancing with present needs of all Australians, environment and economy, is a really critical part of the vision. The other aspect of the vision looks at how to integrate sustainability risks and impacts and opportunities into financial decision making, and ensuring that financial inclusion, well-being and informed choice are integrated into the financial system as well. And the final aspect of the vision is about aligning more capital flow to delivering sustainable development and an orderly transition to net zero emissions. well as social inclusive. So you'll see coming through the vision is both social and the environmental at many different levels of the financial. Both of those are key aspects, I would say, and key elements of the roadmap. So the roadmap also requires change and commitments from financial sector participants in order to achieve that vision. So it'll require significant action, and it extends, as I mentioned, beyond climate. So while climate and the transition to net zero is really important, it also looks at the Sdgs, the Paris Agreement, Sendai, the Convention on Biological Diversity. So it's got that broad scope and focus. There's a focus on leadership and embedding sustainability at all levels. And it also emphasises the power of collaboration and the need for the sector to work right across those different groups, as Jackie mentioned, banking, insurers and asset managers and asset owners, but also collaboration outside of the sector, with civil society, with academia, with government, with the regulators. So those four elements are really integral to what is needed. So there are four key areas of recommendations, and these are the domains that I was mentioning, and I'll go into each one in a little bit more detail in the following slides. And within those four domains, there are 37 different recommendations that are recommendations at multiple different levels. And this is recognising that there'll be change needed at both the company level, the industry level, in regulation and policy, at the community and consumer level, and really at the economy-wide level. And so the roadmap and the actions contained in the roadmap, the recommendations, really cover all of those different levels. And the focus is very much on the next decade. So recognising that 2030 will be critical for both climate action as well as critical for the achievement of the SDGs. So looking to accelerate progress and accelerate action over the next decade. So this slide gives you a little bit more detail around the different focus areas within the domains and specific examples, and I might go to the next few slides which call out the recommendations in more detail and through those individually. So the first domain is embedding sustainability into leadership, and these really focus on sustainability being led from the top in financial institutions. They go to the culture and values that support sustainability within institutions and across the sector more broadly, and really encourage cross-sectoral partnerships and the skills to make those partnerships work effectively as well. So recommendation 2, I would say, is of particular note, and it highlights the university sector as really critical for integrating sustainable finance into core curriculum for both finance as well as related degrees. It also highlights supporting establishment of university-hosted centres for sustainable finance and working to deliver skills and training in sustainable finance across all levels of all. Another recommendation under this domain is establishing ASFI as a permanent body to drive forward implementation of the roadmap. As Jackie mentioned, we're sort of in the process of setting up the final pieces of the governance structure, the advisory committee, and prioritising some of the early projects for ASFI. So very much good progress on that recommendation. This domain also includes First Peoples recommendations intended to support self-determination for Indigenous Australians. The research that was done as part of the roadmap development found nearly 50% of Indigenous Australians are experiencing severe or high financial stress and have significantly lower levels of access to financial services and products. So there's a higher reliance on high-cost, unregulated forms of credit. So these recommendations are really intended to support meaningful engagement between the financial system participants and Indigenous peoples, improving financial outcomes for Indigenous Australians and supporting self-determination. Moving on to the next domain, which is about integrating sustainability into practice. These recommendations focus on ensuring sustainability reporting is credible, transparent, comparable, and sufficient to support the finance sector maximise their contribution to the SDGs. Particularly climate action is a key focus in this. This domain also highlights the need to enable financial institutions manage climate-related risks, both at the investment portfolio and system level. Again, as I mentioned before, many of the recommendations look at these multiple levels of change and action that's required. So recommendations under this domain focus on climate-related disclosures, driving an increase in reporting that's aligned with emerging global standards, particularly climate-related reporting under the TCFD. They also cover biodiversity-related reporting and ensuring Australia's involved in the development of global standards around nature-related reporting. We're seeing developing quite quickly. The recommendations cover both individual company level reporting, financial institution reporting, and also highlight the need for system-wide guidance, support and stress testing, as well as international collaboration to ensure harmonisation around all of these reporting. One recommendation under this domain that I'll particularly call out is the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy recommendation, so number 9. So the EU has, as Jackie mentioned, has sort of been leading globally on sustainable finance, and they've been developing a taxonomy for a couple of years through a technical expert group advising the Commission and on the content and development of the taxonomy, and the European Commission's in the final process of delegated regulations to really formalise the content of that taxonomy. But it's not just the EU that's developed taxonomy. China, other Southeast Asian nations, Canada, Singapore, are all in the process of developing their own taxonomies. So it's very much a global push, recognising the value of taxonomies to sort of underpin the growth and credibility of sustainable finance markets. So this is a project that ASFI will take on as an early special project under the Institute. There's strong support from the Council of Financial Regulators, and we're looking at how to establish a project kind of steering governance structure that allows technical expert input for a range of the different sectors and industries we'll be looking at the taxonomy. So the other recs in this domain include improving information available to support financial decision making, particularly that integrates social and environmental information, and working with regulators to ensure sustainability is integrated into and supported by regulatory and standards. So the next domain is about enabling resilience for all Australians, really enabling all Australians to access financial services and products that they need in a way that supports their goals and well-being. So the recommendations cover building community-based resilience through access to new financial products, extending customer access and improving financial inclusion of currently underserved individuals. These recommendations also include a number of actions to enable improved financial decision-making, so building financial capability, improving labelling standards for financial products, and ensuring consumers can make financial decisions that are aligned with their values and particularly their sustainability preference. There are also recommendations under this domain that encourage financial institutions to re-examine how products are designed and rolled out, and to ensure they're not increasing vulnerability and are supporting customers. So the final domain is around building sustainable finance markets. So many of these recommendations recognise that there'll be a need for significant additional capital to deploy to achieve both climate goals and the SDGs. And much of this will require a significant scale up of sustainable finance markets. Given the focus of market building under this domain, the recommendations also focus on collaborative efforts to make progress and regularly reporting and holding ourselves as an industry to account on the progress being made and seeing whether that's sufficient to support the transition necessary. So the next slide was included in the roadmap and really laid out the anticipated implementation schedule for all of the recommendations. As I mentioned, some of these are well progressed, including kind of establishment of a permanent ASFI. Others are well underway with organisations from across the finance sector really taking forward leading on some of the recommendations. So for example, the financial inclusion action plans, many institutions who are ASFI members have recently developed financial inclusion action plans, and that's an area where there's quite a lot of attention from both banks and insurers. Some of the free prior informed consent is being taken forward by RIA and AXI. Both of them have working groups to look at Indigenous issues, and others, though, in this slide, in this roadmap, will need to be kind of accelerated. As I mentioned, the Taxonomy project was initially considered to be a medium-term project, but there's strong support to bring. This gives you sort of a broad idea of are likely to progress sooner or later. So the next step is to do some small group discussions. I'll go back and put the 4 domains on, but it would be good to get a show of hands from people, just so that we can work out the breakout groups. We probably have 3 discussion groups, I would say, given the amount of people included. And ideally we could keep those relatively even, but we are very keen that you choose a group, a domain that really aligns with your research and your interests, so that we can have a really productive discussion around how you see your research aligning. I'll just put questions up for the discussion. How you see your research aligning with those roadmap recommendations, how you might be interested in contributing, which research gaps there are for each of the domains as well, because that's also important and interesting for us to map out to see where there might be opportunities for additional research or implementation of those recommendations. And the final question, how you think the link between research and practice, particularly in the domain that you're discussing. I might, I'll go back to the slide that outlines the domains. Just trying to see everyone on the screen. So I might just get a quick either electronic or real hand, show of hands as to who would be keen to join the group on embedding into leadership. The group. Okay, so we've got 1. Anyone else? Oh, two more electronic hands. 2, 3. Excellent. Okay. Integrating sustainability into practice. Okay, so we've got 4. Excellent. What about the next one? Embedding resilience for all Australians. So I think we've got 2 for that, 3 for that. And then building sustainable finance. Okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that one's 6. That one's the most popular. So we might combine domains 1 and 3, and then domains 2 and 4. I'll stop sharing and then set up the breakout rooms. So you, in a moment, you'll see, so for domain 1 and 3, please join breakout room 1. And then for domain 2 and 4, join breakout room 2 when you see it up in your... Okay, so if you, the pop-up on your screen, if you scroll down, you can choose the group.
Sorry, Kirsty, I'm not seeing it come up to say join the breakout room to get into group 2.
I can assign you there, Jackie.
Thanks, Natalie. I think Ben was also trying to go to
please.
group 2.
To practice and market.
I'll go
Yes.
to 1.
Great.
Oh, you'll go to 1? Okay.
Okay. And
it's Jackie here. If you could just assign me to group 1, the 1 and 3. Yeah.
Through.
Same for me, Natalie.
Marion, you'll go to number 1.
Yep.
Here we go. And I've got Nava and Philip. Hi. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, Philip.
Group 4.
So that's number 2. Practice and market.
2, thank you. 2 for me.
2. So 2 market. Not sure why I can't assign you there, Philip. You should be able to, there should be a pop-up on your screen that says join group.
Practice and markets. Just
Yes, yep,
yeah,
just
okay.
join group.
Katriana, where would you like to go?
Hi, well, I'm actually just observing really from a non-academic perspective. So I just shot a note to Christy to say that I'm happy to just sit it out. I just was keen to hear at a quite high level of a summary, and so I don't need to participate. I'm just here with Jackie and Ben, Jackie Teal and Ben Neville.
Right.
So could I rejoin a little bit later? I mean, what's appropriate?
Yes, so we'll be coming back in half an hour, 30 minutes. So if you want to log out, I'll keep an eye out when you're joining back in.
I'll just keep it running
or that way.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll just keep it
All right.
running in the background. Thank you both. Okay.
Thanks
bye.
a lot.
Bye.
Oh, hi,
Okay.
Natalie. Thanks for that.
That's okay.
I was doing this for the first time. I was like,
No, it went well. I'm gonna mute and put my screensaver up and run and do some things, and I'll be back.
Yeah. All right. See ya.
Thanks. Hi, Cardi.
Hello.
Just wondering, should we send a broadcast so there's no 1 minute left?
Oh, I've automated that, so there should have been one, and there should have been a timer going on.
Perfect.
So I can send one.
Oh, 35 minutes.
Hmm?
Oh, no, I'm looking at the wrong one. Yeah. It's right.
Wondering whether that's gone into all the. Hope that's gone into all. Let's just go here. I can put it on there.
Ah, there we go.
Close now. Yeah.
Hi, Kathy. I'll have to leave now because I've got another meeting. I'm already late.
Okay, no worries.
Thanks for the
We'll
wonderful
record it.
session.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We were just in the process of hearing from Shalini, who got cut off. So, Shalini, I might ask you to actually put your little summary in chat so we don't lose it, because it sounded very interesting. And we had such a great, robust discussion from everyone in our breakout group that it was really exciting. And anyone who didn't feel they got heard, if you want to put your comments in chat, we'll make sure that we don't lose those points. That would be really useful. What we want to do is just have a bit of a feedback to the bigger group on just what the key pieces were that were discussed. And so I might hand over, I put poor Marion on the spot in our group so that everyone could participate quite freely in their discussion, and Marion would take the notes and be our feedback person. So if I could put you on the spot again, Marion, to actually feed back from our group what the key themes were that came through.
Thanks, Jackie. And please, those of you that made some, very detailed sort of information about your research, please jump in if I haven't. I only started capturing it after a while. So one of the first points, I think a really important one, which underpins probably most of the recommendations in the roadmap, is the issue of training and teaching around sustainability. And the point that we discussed was that this needs to be a core capability across many disciplines, not just for the finance one. And so the proposal is about how to embed that in the curriculum, involving also the professional development associations so that it's a cross-disciplinary capability. So that was one of the first points. The second one was really looking at sort of noting the complexity and the cross-cutting nature of a lot of the issues, particularly around nature-based solutions, that there was an institutional structural value of connecting the different disciplines within an institution, and then potentially linking that with a network that was set up which acted as a knowledge broker with industry, and that might have the role to look at, how, say, tools like for biodiversity modelling, to see how they actually might be adopted by industry. The third one we looked at, we heard about some masterclasses that were being run where the modelling tools were discussed and sort of further developed with industry to help them understand how they might work. And so the idea was that the kind of teaching that might take place within a university could help link the sustainability finance knowledge tools and connected with industry pathways in terms of how they might be applied. There was also a comment around that this could be linked with circular economy, particularly the kind of classifications and objectives in a taxonomy, and that could also be part of developing further tools which reflects the way that risks intersect in terms of sustainable finance and circular economy. We also heard from Monash that they have produced an index which puts the price on carbon, which makes a comparison between the different jurisdictions and to show that the evolution in price over time and the sensitivity of stocks and markets, and to show how that's been evolving. That they're looking at work on how asset owners can decarbonise their portfolios and look at other examples of strategies to reduce the carbon footprint. There is work being done on developing an index for a carbon footprint index for funds and investments to look at a tool which can be used for the general market as well as asset owners to know, what's the footprint of the investment product that they're involved in. There was a lot of commentary in our group around the interdisciplinarity of the research being undertaken. In the example of one university, that there was a way to connect those schools and researchers and departments across climate change related topics, and that the institution could also play a role in bringing that internal network to the external network, say ASFI and other bodies, to expand linkages as well as investment. And then in addition to that, there's another project which is connected with sustainable finance around modern slavery statements. And we heard about the example that there had been a report issued which had assessed the ASX 100 in terms of the quality of those statements, and that had seen fairly soon afterwards significant engagement by the industry with research to assist them in preparing their statements for the next year. So that might be another area which could be added in terms of understanding how modern slavery is reflected, or the statements are reflected in relation to an investment portfolio. And then we started hearing from Shalini, which we will cut off. So I hope that summarises broadly what we all heard, some fantastic areas of research.
Thank you, Marion. Really appreciate your feedback. And thank you, Shalini, for putting in the chat. It would be worth other people following up your link there on fastinitiative.org. So thank you for sharing that. Now the second breakout group, and a report back from your discussions.
So I'm going to do the report back. May not be as comprehensive as Marion, so please, others in the group, feel free to jump in and add anything additional that the broader group would benefit from as well. We had a fantastically kind of rich discussion focusing mainly on disclosures. There's a lot of really relevant research that's going on about how corporates are undertaking TCFD disclosures, or the level of other disclosure and the type of other disclosures that they're doing. We talked a lot about the use of evidence and research and ensuring that that's integrated into the design of reporting and disclosure standards, using examples from GRI, but also thinking about how in the development of new global disclosure standards, we ensure that the vast amount of research around this is able to be well integrated, recognising that setting of these standards is sometimes quite political, but there's a real need for evidence to be informing standards that are being set and implemented. There was also discussion around integrating the SDGs and thinking more broadly than climate. Some work that a few different people were doing to enable that sort of mindset shift, to very much linking to the domain on leadership as well, and the link between reporting and then action, and how reporting and what is reported on drives action. So the other area that we talked a little bit about was linking the physical science or climate science with social science, and how you translate some of the models and scientific information for use by the finance sector. And then making sure that in the development of a sustainable finance market, but also thinking about the equality impact and thinking about the social impact, positive and negative, of the sustainable finance market, thinking about who pays equality, not just within countries, but between countries. And finally, thinking about the super industry as a big player in the Australian financial sector in particular. And so when designing new products or thinking about new ways to catalyse capital for sustainability, thinking about their needs and how to integrate those into new product design. And there was also lots of interest, I guess, in participating and ongoing kind of discussions in a forum where industry and practice come together with research, and the idea that there's mutual benefit accessing more data sets to enable kind of research that is much more robust and credible, and access to data is sometimes difficult for academics working in this area, as well as the ability for practitioners to really learn from and understand and integrate the research evidence base. Anyone else from our group, feel free to jump in. Yeah.
Sounds like you captured it quite concisely, and thank you everyone for all your detail in the chat, that people can follow up all your areas of research, and particularly for ASFI to consider how that might be able to be a contribution to aligning in some of the recommendations. And I hopefully you found that useful to hear from each other as well. I opened our breakout group saying one of the things I'm realising in this busy world of Zoom, we often didn't get enough time to connect with others across institutions in the last year. So thank you all for being so open and participating so freely. Christy, I'll be handing over to you now to lead a poll of the participants and also to summarise next steps.
Fantastic, thanks very much, Jackie. So as Jackie mentioned right at the beginning, one of the objectives of today was to really test interest and understand from you whether you would be interested in this becoming an ongoing engagement between ASFI and the research and university sector. So to that end, we've got a few questions that we'll put up as a poll. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with polls, but it should pop up on your screen any moment. So the first one captures a bit of what we talked about. What's the key domain? So I'll just give people that question. Let us know in the chat if you're having any problems. Yeah.
Hi, Christy. I was in the middle filling out the poll and then it disappeared. Is it just me or?
I'm not sure Kati is.
Okay, maybe it's
Same thing happened to me. Natasha's just noting that there's some kind of error message as I submitted. Yeah, I got the same thing, Natasha. So
I'll relaunch the poll. Yeah. Let's see whether that works.
Where do you actually fill it in? Because I couldn't see, there wasn't anything to sort of click. It was just the name of the...
There should be a poll coming up. Hang on.
Okay. We'll start again.
So it should pop up now. Is it popping up in your screen?
How do you respond? Oh, it's better. How do you respond to it? Oh, it's got it now. Got it now.
Got it now? Yes, it's working now on my end as well. Fantastic. Apologies about that. Little technological glitches.
Excellent. So nearly everyone's submitted. So it looks like most people are interested in the practice domain, with leadership closely following, and then markets in third, and then resilience. So, which is really encouraging actually to see a good spread of interest and right across all 4 of the domains. And clearly from the discussion in our group on practice, there's a lot of very relevant research that's in the poll. So the next question, everyone unanimously is kind of in support of having an annual forum, and nearly everyone is interested in joining us to, I guess, work with ASFI to coordinate and contribute to the forum. So thank you, that's extremely encouraging. As Jackie, I guess, alluded to at the beginning, we're relatively new, have a relatively small team, but very much see our role as collaborating and working with others right across not just the finance sector and industry, but right across those interested in driving forward sustainable finance. So we will get in touch with you off the back of this workshop, and I'm sure all of you will have a well-deserved break over the Christmas holidays, but when things start up again, February, March, early next year, we'll look at pulling together a small group that we can work with to both have kind of regular and ongoing dialogues like this, because from my perspective, this has been incredibly useful. There's a huge breadth and depth of research out there. Many of you have been involved in the roadmap development process, but I think as we move towards implementation, it's even more important that we're drawing on the huge wealth of knowledge and expertise that all of you have, and both within your research teams, but your broader universities as well. The university sector has come out through the discussions will be critical in driving forward that leadership aspect of the roadmap, as well as practice and developing new financial products and developing markets. So there's strong alignment, I would say, and real opportunities right across. Anna.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, because I couldn't really decide whether I should go into the first breakout room or the second one, but I thought it would be important, and I mentioned this, I did do a small contribution to the roadmap, the initial report, around the Principles for Responsible Management Education, so PRIME, the UN organisation, and particularly because, you know, there's many academics here, and in terms of that sort of leadership strategy and, you know, getting it into getting sustainability, sustainable finance into the curriculum, it's a wonderful initiative. And certainly, you know, at USyd, I'm leading the work there, so we're actually, you know, integrating it into, you know, our research teaching and all the portfolios. And then I know I mentioned it in the chat, but if people are looking at how do you integrate, you know, the ideas and the concepts at a multidisciplinary level, particularly if you're in like a business school. And so that's something I've done this year in, you know, one of our biggest ever programs. We had, you know, 2,300 students in semester 1, 1,500 this semester, and it's all around that shifting that mindset of business from shareholder primacy to something more responsible. And, you know, it is a introductory course at the master's level, but it's certainly, we get that opportunity to touch on many of these issues and give students that real flavour, so that then when they go into their, you know, out into their shareholder primacy courses in the business school, we teach them a lot of critical thinking and reflection. So hopefully they take that with them. And really, you know, a big message for us is that these are the jobs of the future. So, you know, I encourage people to look at what PRIME are doing, and, you know, maybe it's something for your university to sign up to. And there's a big push around integrating the SDGs. So I just thought I'd mention that, and, you know, happy to share more on that individually or with ASFI if you need or like.
Fantastic, thank you very much. We do have a little bit of time, so happy if anyone else would like to make some final comments before we wrap up in 7 or 8 minutes. Anyone else to make?
I think this has been a great start, and I'm really excited to talk some more about all of these things. I do think that the question of investing in networks, like there are people who are paid academics here whose role it is to produce research, but it's also something that, you know, scales with that investment, and so dedicated roles to support that engagement. I know you're a small initiative, but it's something to think about for the long term, is how to kind of build that structural connection beyond a once-a-year forum and some committees, and actually think about how we're going to knit together a national, research and finance sector collaboration in the long run. I really think that's something that Australia could benefit from and could do, and has the capacity, certainly from a research skill perspective, and the global leadership in an academic context, that could be really awesome for us all to do together in the long run.
Fantastic. I'll take that, Rachel, as your number one committee member. We can start small and sort of build it out over time. But no, agree that ultimately the objective is to, I guess, institutionalise this and ensure that, yes, we have a range of different levels and activities of collaborative efforts to really allow what we've seen come through today. I think is a really strong roadmap and what industry is trying to do, and the research ability that we have at university. Anyone else want to jump in before we finish up?
No, just to say, Kirsty, that if you need a host for your annual forum, we could do that at University of Melbourne. So I noticed there was a number of colleagues who are based in Melbourne, Monash, RMIT, Swinburne. So happy to put that forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jackie.
Kirsty,
you're also on the committee.
Yeah. And so thank you very much. I thought that this is a fantastic forum to start the conversation and to make some real initiatives. So particularly from finance background, I find that still the academic work on sustainable finance related issues is still very limited, particularly because of as Andrew has mentioned, the limited data. And from my perspective, what is more so challenging is that to change the culture and mindset, that is, we are talking about the leadership, that is, there is a value in it for everyone. But the problem is that the objective or the fiduciary duties of the leadership is to look after mainly the shareholders, primacy, as Anna Young has mentioned, that she has introduced a new topic, which is fantastic. But the fundamental problem or challenges for us is to establish that, as I mentioned, that value for not only for the shareholders, also for the others. But the question is that from the loss perspective, to what extent the leadership has been given the leverage to look after the interest of the other stakeholders within that particular company. So these are the few fundamental building blocks that we need to address before we move on further. And at the same time, as an academic, to provide some evidence that will be creating, adding to this campaign, that is sustainable finance really makes sense and it has a value for everyone. We need some good data, as Andrew has highlighted, that the data is not there. So these are the things that we need to work on to also change the culture in terms of linking the pay of the executives to the sustainable practice of their companies, these sort of things. And I see that there are great potentials for academic and industry collaborations on that area.
Absolutely, I agree, and many ASFI members are kind of considering that in different ways, and that was definitely our hope from this discussion as well, that it could start to build that bridge and allow academics and researchers access to that data, which is difficult to come by publicly, obviously. So yes, absolutely, huge value and benefit on both sides. Anyone else like to jump in before we close up?
Hi, I just want to add a very quick note. So my name is Na from Monash, and on the point that we were talking about the availability of data, I just want to highlight to everyone that Monash, together with 2 industry partners, have produced the Real Carbon Index, and the data is available, and you can download from the website. And the index started from the 1990s, so it is long enough and it's meaningful for if you want to run some analysis or some sensitivity or some analysis of how companies sectors, industry or markets are sensitive to the change in the price of carbon. So please come and have a look at, on our website if you are interested in the data. Okay. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And the resources in the chat, we'll extract those and send the links around when we send up a follow-up as well, so that everyone will have those for future reference. So a huge thank you to everyone for your very active participation and engagement. It's been a hugely interesting and fruitful discussion. I think there's clearly a lot of interest and a lot of engagement and interest in kind of this being an ongoing collaborative effort. So that's really encouraging to see, and there's a lot of alignment between many of the research projects that you're already doing, but also some of the things that you're starting to think about or that we've identified as potential gaps where we accelerate practice. So thank you very much. Thank you especially to Jackie for facilitating and for really being the driver and the bridge between the academic and business sector. Your leadership in that right through the development of the roadmap has been incredible, and we look forward to sort of taking that forward. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Christy.
Bye.